What were the Beagle voyages?
The HMS Beagle was a naval survey ship that left England in December 1831 to chart the coastal waters of Patagonia, Peru, and Chile. On a voyage that would last 5 years, Darwin's job as unpaid companion to the captain on board the Beagle allowed him to satisfy his interests in natural history. On its way to Asia, the ship spent time in the Galapagos Islands off the coast of Ecuador. Darwin's observations there caused him to generate his theory of natural selection.
When was the comet Hale-Bopp first observed?
Comet Hale-Bopp was first observed by Alan Hale in New Mexico and Thomas Bopp in Arizona on July 22. 1995. Their discovery was announced by the International Astronomical Union on July 23, 1995. Hale-Bopp was closest to Earth in March 1997 when it was 122 million miles, 196 million kilometers, away. It is a very large comet with a nucleus of approximately 25 miles. 40 kilometers, in diameter, making it 4 times as large as Halley's Comet. Although most comets have 2 tails, Hale-Bopp exhibited 3 tails. The 2 tails typical of most comets are the dust tail and the ion tail. The dust tail, consisting of dust and debris from the nucleus, streams behind the comet in its orbit. The ion tail, consisting of the comet's material interacting with the solar wind, faces away from the sun. Hale-Bopp's third tail was composed of neutral sodium atoms. Hale-Bopp was visible with the naked eye for nearly 19 months. It is not expected to return for 4,000 years.
What is the difference between a reptile and an amphibian?
Reptiles are clad in scales, shields, or plates, and their toes have claws. Amphibians have moist, glandular skins, and their toes lack claws. Reptile eggs have a thick, hard, or parchment-like shell that protects the developing embryo from moisture loss, even on dry land. The eggs of amphibians lack this protective outer covering and are always laid in water or in damp places. Young reptiles are miniature replicas of their parents in general appearance, if not always in coloration and pattern. Juvenile amphibians pass through a larval, usually aquatic, stage before they metamorphose, change in form and structure, into the adult form. Reptiles include alligators, crocodiles, turtles, and snakes. Amphibians include salamanders, toads, and frogs.
What is a bug, biologically speaking?
The biological meaning of the word bug is significantly more restrictive than in common usage. People often refer to all insects as bugs, even using the word to include such organisms as bacteria and viruses, as well as glitches in computer programs. In the strictest biological sense, a bug is a member of the order Hemiptera, also called true bugs. Members of Hemiptera include bedbugs, squash bugs, clinch bugs, stink bugs, and water striders.
What is the phobia of the number 13 called?
Fear of the number 13 is known as tridecaphobia, tridecaphobia, or triskidecaphobia. Persons may fear any situation involving this number, including a house number, the floor of a building, or the 13th day of the month. Many buildings omit labeling the 13th floor as such for this reason. A phobia can develop for a wide range of objects, situations, or organisms.
Why were tomatoes often called love apples and considered aphrodisiacs?
Tomatoes belong to the nightshade family. They were cultivated in Peru and introduced to Europe by Spanish explorers. Tomatoes were introduced to Italy from Morocco. So the Italian name for the fruit was Pomi d'amore, meaning apples of the Moors. The French called the tomato pommes d'amour, meaning apples of love. This latter name may have referred to the fact that tomatoes were thought to have aphrodisiac powers. Or it may have been a corruption of the Italian name. When tomato plants were first introduced to Europe, many people viewed them with suspicion. Since poisonous members of the nightshade family were commonly known. Although the tomato is neither poisonous nor an aphrodisiac, it took centuries for it to fully overcome its undeserved reputation.
What is the role of friction in striking a match?
The head at the tip of a strike anywhere match contains all the chemicals required to create a spark. A strike anywhere match only needs to be rubbed against a surface with a high coefficient of friction, such as sandpaper, to create enough frictional heat to ignite the match. Safety matches differ from strike anywhere matches since the chemicals necessary for ignition are divided between the match head and the treated strip found on the matchbox or matchbook. The friction between the match head and treated strip will ignite the match. Matches fail to ignite when wet because water reduces friction.
What is the Darwin-Wallace theory?
The Darwin-Wallace theory can be summarized as the following. Species as a whole demonstrate descent with modification from common ancestors. And natural selection is the sum of the environmental forces that drive those modifications. The modifications or adaptations make the individuals in the population. better suited to survival in their environment, more fit as it were. The four postulates presented by Darwin in On the Origin of Species by Natural Selection are as follows. 1. Individuals within species are variable. 2. Some of these variations are passed on to offspring. 3. In every generation more offspring are produced than can survive. 4. The survival and reproduction of individuals are not random, the individuals who survive and go on to reproduce the most are those with the most favorable variation. They are naturally selected. It follows logically from these that the characteristics of the population will change with each subsequent generation. Until the population becomes distinctly different from the original, this process is known as evolution.
What was the distribution of radioactive fallout after the 1986 Chernobyl accident?
Radioactive fallout, containing the isotope cesium-137, and nuclear contamination covered an enormous area, including Belarusia, Latvia, Lithuania, the central portion of the then Soviet Union, the Scandinavian countries, the Ukraine, Poland, Austria, Czechoslovakia, Germany, Switzerland, northern Italy, eastern France, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, Yugoslavia, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. The fallout, extremely uneven because of the shifting wind patterns, extended 1,200 to 1,300 miles, 1,930 to 2,090 kilometers, from the point of the accident. Estimates of the effects of this fallout range from 28,000 to 100,000 deaths from cancer and genetic defects within the next 50 years. In particular, livestock in high rainfall areas received unacceptable dosages of radiation.
How does a food chain function?
A food chain is the transfer of food energy from the source in plants through a series of organisms eating and being eaten by other organisms. Food chains overlap because many organisms eat more than one type of food, so that these chains can look more like food webs. In 1891, German zoologist Karl Semper, 1832 to 1893, introduced the food chain concept.
How many chromosomes are in a human body cell?
A human being normally has 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs, in all but the sex cells. Half of each pair is inherited from the mother's egg, the other, from the father's sperm. When the sperm and egg unite in fertilization, they create a single cell, or zygote, with 46 chromosomes. When cell division occurs, the 46 chromosomes are duplicated. This process is repeated billions of times over, with each of the cells containing the identical set of chromosomes. Only the gametes, or sex cells, are different. In their cell division, the members of each pair of chromosomes are separated and distributed to different cells. Each gamete has only 23 chromosomes.
What are the essential nutrient elements required for plant growth?
Essential nutrients are chemical elements that are necessary for plant growth. An element is essential for plant growth when, 1. It is required for a plant to complete its life cycle. To produce viable seeds, 2. It is part of a molecule or component of the plant that is itself essential to the plant, such as the magnesium in the chlorophyll molecule. And the plant displays symptoms of deficiency in the absence of the element. Essential nutrients are also referred to as essential minerals and essential inorganic nutrients.
What are some common causes of poisoning?
Poisoning is defined as the exposure to any substance in sufficient quantity to cause adverse health effects. Poisonings can be grouped into several different categories, including intentional, accidental, occupational and environmental, social and iatrogenic. Accidental poisonings are the most common, with more than 90% occurring in children at home. Intentional poisonings are usually suicide-related, with carbon monoxide being one of the most frequently used agents. Toxic chemical releases in industrial accidents are an occupational and environmental hazard. How was Mr.
If you melted all the ice in the world, how high would the oceans rise?
If you melted all the ice in the world, some 5.5 million cubic miles, 23 million cubic kilometers. In all, the oceans would rise 1.7% or about 180 feet, 60 meters. Which is enough, for example, for 20 stories of the Empire State Building to be underwater.
What safety rules should be observed during a thunderstorm?
These safety rules should be observed when lightning threatens. Stay indoors. Seek shelter in buildings. If no buildings are available, the best protection is a cave, ditch, canyon, or under head-high clumps of trees in open forest glades. If there is no shelter, avoid the highest object in the area. Keep away from isolated trees. Get out of the water and off small boats. Do not use the telephone. Do not use metal objects like fishing rods and golf clubs. Stay in your automobile if you are traveling. Do not use plug-in electrical equipment like hair dryers, electric razors, or electric toothbrushes during the storm.
Who was the first African American in space?
Guion S. Bluford Jr., 1942, became the first African American to fly in space during the Space Shuttle Challenger mission STS-8, August 30 to September 5, 1983. Astronaut Bluford, who holds a PhD in aerospace engineering, made a second shuttle flight aboard Challenger mission STS-61A/Spacelab D1, October 30 to November 6, 1985. The first black man to fly in space was Cuban cosmonaut Arnaldo Tamayo Mendez, who was aboard Soyuz 38 and spent 8 days aboard the Soviet space station Salyut 6 during September 1980. Dr. Macy Jemison became the first African American woman in space on September 12, 1992 aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour mission Spacelab J.
What is the difference between the degrees Doctor of Dental Surgery, DDS, and Doctor of Medical Dentistry, DMD?
The title depends entirely on the school's preference in terminology. The degrees are equivalent.
What is a Siberian Express?
This term describes storms that are severely cold and cyclonic. They descend from northern Canada and Alaska to other parts of the United States.
Is DNA always copied exactly?
Considering how many cells there are in the human body and how often it occurs, DNA replication is fairly accurate. Spontaneous damage to DNA is low, occurring at the rate of 1 to 100 mutations per 10 billion cells in bacteria. The rate for eukaryotic genes is higher, about 1 to 10 mutations per million gametes. The rate of mutation can vary according to different genes in different organisms.
How much money can be saved by lowering the setting on a home furnace thermostat?
Studies have shown that a 5 degrees Fahrenheit reduction in the home thermostat setting for approximately 8 hours will save up to 10% in fuel costs.
Which skills are controlled by the left cerebral hemisphere? And which are controlled by the right cerebral hemisphere?
The left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, as well as spoken and written language, logic, reasoning, and scientific and mathematical abilities. In contrast, the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body and is associated with imagination. spatial perception, recognition of faces, and artistic and musical abilities.
What invertebrate lives in both marine and fresh waters and is one of the most important of all animals?
Copepods, tiny crustaceans, are the link between the photosynthetic life in the ocean or pond and the rest of the aquatic food web. They are primary consumers grazing on algae in the waters of the oceans and ponds. These organisms, among the most abundant multicellular animals on Earth, are then consumed by a variety of small predators, which are eaten by larger predators, and so on. Virtually all animal life in the ocean depends on the copepods, either directly or indirectly. Although humans do not eat copepods directly, our sources of food from the ocean would disappear without the copepods.
What is stardust and are we really made of it?
The heavy elements that comprise the Earth, such as iron, silicon, oxygen, and carbon, originally formed in distant stars that exploded, sending their heavy elements into space. Earth and all life on it are, in fact, recycled stellar debris. An asteroid came close to hitting Earth sometime in 2002.
Did dinosaurs and humans ever coexist?
No. Dinosaurs first appeared in the Triassic period, about 220 million years ago, and disappeared at the end of the Cretaceous period, about 65 million years ago. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, appeared only about 25,000 years ago. Movies that show humans and dinosaurs existing together are only Hollywood fantasies.
What was the mission of the Galileo spacecraft?
Galileo, launched October 18, 1989. Required almost 6 years to reach Jupiter after looping past Venus once and Earth twice. The Galileo spacecraft was designed to make a detailed study of Jupiter and its rings and moons over a period of years. On December 7, 1995, it released a probe to analyze the different layers of Jupiter's atmosphere. Galileo recorded a multitude of measurements of the planet, its 4 largest moons, and its mammoth magnetic field. The mission was originally scheduled to continue until the end of 1997, but, since it continued to operate successfully, missions exploring Jupiter's moons were added in 1997, 1999, and 2001. Galileo ended on September 21, 2003. When it passed into Jupiter's shadow and disintegrated in the planet's dense atmosphere.
Which organism has the largest number of chromosomes?
Ophioglossum reticulatum, a species of fern, has the largest number of chromosomes with more than 1,260, 630 pairs.
Who is generally regarded as the father of medicine?
Hippocrates, c. 460 c. 377 BCE, a Greek physician, holds this honor. Greek medicine, previous to Hippocrates, was a mixture of religion, mysticism, and necromancy. Hippocrates established the rational system of medicine as a science, separating it from religion and philosophy. Diseases had natural causes and natural laws, they were not the wrath of the gods. Hippocrates believed that the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, were represented in the body by four body fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, or humors. When they existed in harmony within the body was in good health. The duty of the physician was to help nature to restore the body's harmony. Diet, exercise, and moderation in all things kept the body well, and psychological healing. Good attitude toward recovery, bed rest, and quiet were part of his therapy. Hippocrates was the first to recognize that different diseases had different symptoms, and he described them in such detail that the descriptions generally would hold today. His descriptions not only included diagnosis but prognosis.
What are the only mammals that cannot jump?
It might not be surprising to learn that neither the rhinoceros nor the elephant can jump, since their enormous weight makes the feat difficult. However, the third mammal that cannot jump is the pronghorn sheep, which was called an antelope in the famous song Home on the Range. The pronghorn sheep's inability to jump has been a particular disadvantage in its North American home, where fences have prevented populations from migrating and hindered the pronghorn's ability to find mates and breed.
What was the Human Genome Project, HGP, and what were its goals?
The HGP was begun in 1990 as a 13-year effort and completed in 2003. According to the official HGP website, http://www. Dogenomes.
Where is the North Star?
If an imaginary line is drawn from the North Pole into space, it will reach a star called Polaris, or the North Star, less than 1 degree away from the line. As Earth rotates on its axis, Polaris acts as a pivot point around which all the stars visible in the northern hemisphere appear to move, while Polaris itself remains motionless. Identifying Polaris was important for navigation since in locating Polaris it was possible to identify north. In addition, the angle of Polaris above the horizon indicates latitude on Earth.
What are the major parts of the year?
The major parts of the ear are the external ear, middle ear, and inner ear.
What is the oldest continuously published scientific journal?
The Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society of London. First published a few months after the first issue of the journal Discavans. On March 6, 1665, is the oldest, continuously published scientific journal.
When were photovoltaic cells developed?
A group of researchers at Bell Labs, Calvin Fuller, 1902 to 1994, Darrell Chapin, 1906-1995, and Gerald Pearson, 1905 to 1987. Developed the first practical silicon solar cell in 1954. The earliest PV cells were used to power U.S. space satellites. The use of PV cells was then expanded to power small items such as calculators and watches.
What is the difference between short-day plants and long-day plants?
Short-day and long-day plants exhibit a response to photoperiodism, or the changes in light and dark in a 24-hour cycle. Short-day plants form flowers when the days become shorter than a critical length, while long-day plants form flowers when the days become longer than a critical length. Short-day plants bloom in late summer or autumn in middle latitudes. Examples of short-day plants are chrysanthemums, goldenrods, poinsettias, soybeans, and ragweed. Long-day plants bloom in spring and early summer. Some examples of long-day plants are clover, irises, and hollyhocks. Florists and commercial plant growers can adjust the amount of light a plant receives to force it to bloom out of season.
Why do tree leaves change color in the fall?
The carotenoids, pigments in the photosynthesizing cells, which are responsible for the fall colors, are present in the leaves during the growing season. However, the colors are eclipsed by the green chlorophyll. Toward the end of summer, when the chlorophyll production ceases due to declining daylight and a decrease in temperature. The other colors of the carotenoids, such as yellow, orange, red, or purple, become visible. Listed below are the autumn leaf colors of some common trees.
How common are lightning strikes?
Thunderstorms are a very common natural phenomenon. At any given moment, there are 1,800 thunderstorms in progress somewhere on the Earth. Lightning detection systems in the United States monitor an average of 25 million flashes of lightning from cloud to ground every year.
What are the functions of the spleen?
The primary function of the spleen is the filtering of blood and removal of abnormal blood cells by phagocytosis. The spleen also stores iron from worn-out blood cells, which is then returned to the circulation and used by the bone marrow to produce new blood cells. The immune reaction begins in the spleen with the activation of immune response by B cells and T cells in response to antigens in the blood.
Which mammals have the shortest gestation periods?
Gestation is the period of time between fertilization and birth in oviparous animals. The shortest gestation period known is 12 to 13 days, shared by 3 marsupials. The American or Virginian opossum, Didelphys marsupialis, the rare water opossum, or yapak, Chironectes minimus. Of Central and Northern South America, and the eastern native cat, Dosiurus viverinus, of Australia. The young of each of these marsupials are born while still immature, and complete their development in the ventral pouch of their mother. While 12 to 13 days is the average, the gestation period is sometimes as short as 8 days. The longest gestation period for a mammal is that of the African elephant, Loxodonta africana, with an average of 660 days, and a maximum of 760 days.
How much carbon dioxide is produced per gallon of gasoline?
A gallon of gasoline produces 19.4 pounds, 8.8 kilograms, of carbon dioxide. The average passenger vehicle produces 5.2 metric tons, 11,464 pounds, of carbon dioxide annually.
How long does it take for a person to adapt to dim light?
Rods give us vision in dim light but not in color and not with sharp detail. They are hundreds of times more sensitive to light than cones. letting us detect shape and movement in dim light. This type of photoreceptor takes about 15 minutes to fully adapt to very dim light.
Who discovered the dance of the bees?
In 1943, Carl von Frisch, 1886 to 1982, published his study on the dance of the bees. It is a precise pattern of movements performed by returning forager, worker. Honeybees in order to communicate the direction and distance of a food source to the other workers in the hive. The dance is performed on the vertical surface of the hive, and two kinds of dances have been recognized. The round dance, performed when food is nearby, and the waggle dance, done when food is farther away.
How prevalent is back pain in the United States?
Studies have found that low back pain is the most common source of pain. It is also the leading cause of disability in Americans under 45 years old. Back pain may be the result of an injury or associated with certain diseases and conditions. Some conditions and diseases which may cause back pain are scoliosis, arthritis, spinal stenosis, pregnancy, kidney stones, endometriosis, fibromyalgia, infections, tumors, or stress. Tense muscles, spasms, ruptured discs, and other disc problems are also causes of back pain. Exercise, a diet to maintain a healthy weight, and learning to lift properly will prevent back pain.
What is the difference in the functions of the rods and cones found in the eyes?
Rods and cones contain photoreceptors that convert light first to chemical energy and then into electrical energy for transmission to the vision centers of the brain via the optic nerve. Rods are specialized for vision in dim light, they cannot detect color. But they are the first receptors to detect movement and register shapes. There are about 125 million rods in each eye. Cones provide acute vision, functioning best in bright daylight. They allow us to see colors and fine detail. Cones are divided into three different types, which absorb wavelengths in the short, blue, middle, green, and long, red, ranges. There are about 7 million cones in each eye.
What is lactose intolerance?
Lactose, the principal sugar in cow's milk and found only in dairy products, requires the enzyme lactase for human digestion. Lactose intolerance occurs when the lining of the walls of a person's small intestine does not produce normal amounts of this enzyme. Lactose intolerance causes abdominal cramps, bloating, diarrhea, and excessive gas when more than a certain amount of milk is ingested. Most people are less able to tolerate lactose as they grow older. A person having lactose intolerance need not eliminate dairy products totally from the diet. Decreasing the consumption of milk products, drinking milk only during meals. And getting calcium from cheese, yogurt, and other dairy products having lower lactose values are options. Another alternative is to buy a commercial lactose preparation that can be mixed into milk. These preparations convert lactose into simple sugars that can be easily digested.
Who coined the term information superhighway?
A term originally coined by former Vice President Al Gore, 1948. The information superhighway was envisioned as a high-speed electronic communications network to enhance education in America in the 21st century. Its goal was to help all citizens regardless of their income level, connecting all users to one another and providing every type of electronic service possible, including shopping, electronic banking, education, medical diagnosis, video conferencing, and game playing. As the World Wide Web grew, it became the information superhighway.
What chemicals were initially banned by the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants?
A group of chemicals known as the Dirty Dozen were the original group of chemicals banned by the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, POPs. All of these chemicals possess toxic properties, resist degradation, and are transported across international boundaries via air, water, and migratory species. The convention went into effect in 2004. Since then, other chemical compounds have been added or are being considered for inclusion on the list since the original 12. Health effects of these compounds include disruption of the endocrine system, cancer, and adverse effects in the developmental processes of organisms.
What is the most frequently cited scientific journal article?
The most frequently cited scientific article is Protein Measurement with the Fallen Phenol Reagent by Oliver Howe Lowry. 1910 to 1996, and co-workers, published in 1951 in the Journal of Biological Chemistry. Volume 193, Issue 1, pages 265 to 275. As of 2010, this article had been cited 292,968 times since it first appeared.
How large can hailstones become?
The average hailstone is about 0.25 inch, 0.64 centimeter, in diameter. However, hailstones weighing up to 7.5 pounds, 3.4 kilograms, are reported to have fallen in Hyderabad state in India in 1939. Although scientists think these huge hailstones may be several stones that partly melted and stuck together. On April 14, 1986, hailstones weighing 2.5 pounds, 1 kilogram, were reported to have fallen in the Gopalganj district of Bangladesh. The largest hailstone ever recorded in the United States fell in Coffeyville, Kansas. On September 3, 1970. It measured 5.57 inches, 14.15 centimeters, in diameter and weighed 1.67 pounds, 0.75 kilogram. Hail is precipitation consisting of balls of ice. Hailstones usually are made of concentric, or onion-like layers of ice alternating with partially melted and refrozen snow, structured around a tiny central core. It is formed in cumulonimbus, or thunderclouds, when freezing water and ice cling to small particles in the air, such as dust. The winds in the cloud blow the particles through zones of different temperatures, causing them to accumulate additional layers of ice and melting snow and to increase in size.
What is the basic composition of a sponge?
A sponge is supported by a skeleton made of hard crystals called spicules, whose shape and composition are important features in taxonomy. Calcareous sponges have spicules of calcium carbonates, the material of marble and limestone. The silica spicules of the hexactinellid, or glass, sponges are formed into a delicate, glassy network. Demo sponges have siliceous spicules and a network of fibrous protein, spunger, that is similar to collagen. The demo sponges are the source of natural household sponges, which are made by soaking dead sponges in shallow water until all the cellular material has decayed, leaving the spongin network behind. However, most sponges sold now for household use are plastic and have nothing to do with real sponges.
From where do frankincense and myrrh originate?
Frankincense is an aromatic gum resin obtained by tapping the trunks of trees belonging to the genus Boswellia. The milky resin hardens when exposed to the air, forming irregularly shaped granules, the form in which frankincense is usually marketed and sold. Also called olibanum, frankincense is used as an ingredient in many different products, including pharmaceuticals, perfumes, fixatives, fumigants, and incense. Myrrh comes from a tree of the genus Commiphora, native to the northeastern region of Africa and the Middle East. Myrrh is also a resin obtained from trees. It is used in pharmaceuticals, perfumes, and toothpastes.
What antidote is available for mushroom poisoning?
No effective antidote for human poisoning by mushrooms has been discovered. The toxins produced by mushrooms accumulate in the liver and lead to irreversible liver damage. Unfortunately, there may be no indication of poisoning for several hours after ingesting a toxic mushroom. When the symptoms do present, they often resemble typical food poisoning. Liver failure becomes apparent 3 to 6 days after ingesting the poisonous mushroom. Oftentimes a liver transplant may be the only possible treatment.
Is the large intestine essential for life?
Since the role of the large intestine is mainly as a storage site for fecal material and the elimination of it from the body, it is not essential for life. Individuals who suffer from colon cancer or other diseases will often have their colon removed. The end of the ileum is brought to the abdominal wall. Food residues are eliminated directly from the ileum into a sac attached to the abdominal wall on the outside of the body. Alternatively, the ileum may be connected directly to the anal canal.
When does dreaming occur during the sleep cycle?
Almost all dreams occur during REM sleep. Scientists do not understand why dreaming is important. One theory is that the brain is either cataloging the information it acquired during the day and discarding the data it does not want, or is creating scenarios to work through situations causing emotional distress. Regardless of its function, most people who are deprived of sleep or dreams become disoriented, unable to concentrate, and may even have hallucinations.
Who invented the COBOL computer language?
COBOL, Common Business-Oriented Language, is a prominent computer language designed specifically for commercial uses. Created in 1960 by a team drawn from several computer makers and the Pentagon. The best-known individual associated with COBOL was then Lieutenant Grace Murray Hopper, who made fundamental contributions to the U.S. Navy's standardization of COBOL. COBOL excels at the most common kinds of data processing for business, simple arithmetic operations performed on huge files of data. The language endures because its syntax is very much like English and because a program written in COBOL for one kind of computer can run on many others without alteration.
Who was the founder of modern medicine?
Thomas Sydenham, 1624 to 1689, who was also called the English Hippocrates, reintroduced the Hippocratic method of accurate observation at the bedside, and recording of observations, to build up a general clinical description of individual diseases. He is also considered one of the founders of epidemiology and was among the first to describe scarlet fever and Sydenham's chorea.
What is a Lewis acid?
Named after the American chemist Gilbert Newton Lewis, 1875 to 1946. The Lewis theory defines an acid as a species that can accept an electron pair from another atom, and a base as a species that can donate an electron pair to complete the valence shell of another atom. Hydrogen ion, proton, is the simplest substance that will do this. But Lewis acids include many compounds such as boron trifluoride, BF3, and aluminum chloride. AlCl3, that can react with ammonia, for example, to form an addition compound or Lewis salt.
Who was Cleveland Abbé?
Cleveland Abbé, 1838 to 1916, nicknamed the father of the Weather Bureau, was appointed director of the Cincinnati Observatory in 1868. The weather bulletin of the Cincinnati Observatory began, including a 3-day weather forecast on September 22, 1869, prepared by forecaster Cleveland Abbé. In January 1871, Abbé was appointed as a civilian assistant in the National Weather Bureau, where he continued to prepare weather reports and forecasts.
Who discovered the antibiotic streptomycin?
The Russian-born microbiologist Selman A. Waxman, 1888 to 1973, discovered streptomycin in 1943. Streptomycin was the first antibiotic effective against tuberculosis. In 1944, Merck & Company agreed to produce it to be used against tuberculosis and tuberculosis meningitis. Streptomycin ultimately proved to have some human toxicity and was supplanted by other antibiotics. But its discovery changed the course of modern medicine. In addition to its use in treating tuberculosis, it was also used to treat bacterial meningitis, endocarditis, pulmonary and urinary tract infections, leprosy, typhoid fever, bacillary dysentery, cholera, and bubonic plague. Streptomycin saved countless lives, and its development led scientists to search the microbial world for other antibiotics and medicines. Waxman received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1952 for his discovery of streptomycin.
What is a golden section?
Golden section, also called the divine proportion, is the division of a line segment so that the ratio of the whole segment to the larger part is equal to the ratio of the larger part to the smaller part. The ratio is approximately 1.61803 to 1. The number 1.61803 is called the golden number, also called phi with a capital P. The golden number is the limit of the ratios of consecutive Fibonacci numbers, such as For instance, 21/13 and 34/21. A golden rectangle is one whose length and width correspond to this ratio. The ancient Greeks thought this shape had the most pleasing proportions. Many famous painters have used the golden rectangle in their paintings. And architects have used it in their design of buildings, the most famous example being the Greek Parthenon.
When was the first garbage incinerator built?
The first garbage incinerator in the United States was built in 1885 on Governor's Island in New York Harbor.
How is Lyme disease carried?
The cause of Lyme disease is the spirochete Borrelia burgdorferi that is transmitted to humans by the small tick Ixodes damini or other ticks in the Ixodidae family. The tick injects spirochete-laden saliva into the bloodstream or deposits fecal matter on the skin. This multisystemic disease usually begins in the summer with a skin lesion called erythema chronicum migrans. ECM, followed by more lesions, a malar rash, conjunctivitis, and urticaria. The lesions are eventually replaced by small red blotches. Other common symptoms in the first stage include fatigue, intermittent headache, fever, chills, and muscle aches. In stage 2, which can be weeks or months later, cardiac or neurologic abnormalities sometimes develop. In the last stage, weeks or years later, arthritis develops with marked swelling, especially in the large joints. If tetracycline, penicillin, or erythromycin is given in the early stages, the later complications can be minimized. High dosage of intravenously given penicillin can also be effective on the late stages.
What organisms are included in the kingdom fungi?
Members of the kingdom fungi range from single-celled yeasts to Armillaria ostoi, a species that covers 2,220 acres, 890 hectares. Also included are mushrooms that are commonly consumed, the black mold that forms on stale bread, the mildew that grows on damp shower curtains, rusts, smuts, puffballs, toadstools, shelf fungi, and the death cap mushroom, Amanita phalloides. Of the bewildering variety of organisms that live on the planet Earth, perhaps the most unusual and peculiarly different from human beings are fungi. Fungi are able to rot timber, attack living plants, spoil food, and afflict humans with athlete's foot and even worse maladies. Fungi also decompose dead organisms, fallen leaves, and other organic materials. In addition, they produce antibiotics and other drugs, make bread rise, and ferment beer and wine.
If diamond is the hardest substance, What is the next hardest substance?
Cubic boron nitride, which is the hardest ceramic, is the second hardest substance in the world.
Are tortoises and terrapins the same as turtles?
The terms turtle, tortoise, and terrapin are used for various members of the order Testudinus. From the Latin term testudo, meaning tortoise. In North American usage they are all correctly called turtles. The term tortoise is often used for land turtles. In British usage the term tortoise is the inclusive term, and turtle is only applied to aquatic members of the order.
Is assembly language the same thing as machine language?
While the two terms are often used interchangeably, assembly language is a more user-friendly translation of machine language. Machine language is the collection of patterns of bits, recognized by a central processing unit, CPU, as instructions. Each particular CPU design has its own machine language. The machine language of the CPU of a microcomputer generally includes about 75 instructions. The machine language of the CPU of a large mainframe computer may include hundreds of instructions. Each of these instructions is a pattern of ones and zeros that tells the CPU to perform a specific operation. Assembly language is a collection of symbolic, mnemonic names for each instruction in the machine language of its CPU. Like the machine language, the assembly language is tied to a particular CPU design. Programming in assembly language requires intimate familiarity with the CPU's architecture, and assembly language programs are difficult to maintain and require extensive documentation. The computer language C first developed in the late 1980s. Is a high-level programming language that can be compiled into machine languages for almost all computers. From microcomputers to mainframes, because of its functional structure. It was the first series of programs that allowed a computer to use higher-level language programs, and is the most widely used programming language for personal computer software development. C++ was first released in 1985 and is still widely used today.
Where is the San Andreas Fault?
Perhaps the most famous fault in the world. The San Andreas Fault extends from Mexico north through most of California. The San Andreas Fault is not a single fault, but rather a system of faults. The northern half of the fault, near San Francisco, has reverse faults and is mostly mountainous. The southern half, near Los Angeles, has mostly normal faults. Land development has made it difficult to see the fault except in a few locations. notably near Lake San Andreas south of San Francisco. The fault was named in honor of Andrew Lawson, 1861 to 1952. A geologist who studied the 1906 San Francisco earthquake.
How often can a person donate blood?
Blood is one of the most easily donated tissues. According to the American Red Cross, a person in good health who weighs at least 110 pounds, 50 kilograms, can donate blood every 56 days. Platelets may be donated every 7 days up to 24 times per year. Plasma may be donated every 28 days up to 13 times per year.
When was offshore drilling for oil first done?
The first successful offshore oil well was built off the coast at Summerland, Santa Barbara County, California, in 1896.
Is it possible to use animal organs as replacements for human organ transplantation?
In 1984, a 12-day-old infant, baby Faye, received a baboon's heart. She lived for 20 days before her body rejected the transplanted heart. Since the supply of human organs is far less than the need for human organs, researchers continue to search for alternative sources of organs. In 1999, the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, prohibited the use of non-human primate organs for human transplantation unless researchers could assess the risk of disease. A major concern had been that viruses and other diseases that were harmful to the animals would be deadly to humans. Researchers continue to search for alternate sources of organs, including pigs.
What are archaebacteria?
Archaebacteria, domain archaea, are primitive bacteria that often live in extreme environments. This domain includes the following: 1. Thermophils, heat lovers, which live in very hot environments, including the hot sulfur springs of Yellowstone National Park, which reach temperatures ranging from 140 to 176 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 to 80 degrees Celsius. 2. Halophils, salt lovers, which live in locations with high concentrations of salinity, such as the Great Salt Lake in Utah, which has salinity levels that range from 15 to 20%. Seawater normally has a level of salinity of 3%. 3. Methanogens, which obtain their energy by using hydrogen gas, H2, to reduce carbon dioxide, CO2, to methane gas, CH4.
What are halcyon days?
This term is often used to refer to a time of peace or prosperity. Among sailors, it is the 2-week period of calm weather before and after the shortest day of the year. Approximately December 21st. The phrase is taken from halcyon, the name the ancient Greeks gave to the kingfisher. According to legend, the halcyon built its nest on the surface of the ocean and was able to quiet the winds while its eggs were hatching.
How is a DNA molecule held together?
Although DNA is held together by several different kinds of chemical interactions, it is still a rather fragile molecule. The nitrogen bases that constitute the rungs of the ladder are held together by hydrogen bonds. The sides of the ladder, the phosphate and deoxyribose molecules, are held together by a type of covalent bond called a phosphodiester bond. Because part of the DNA molecule is polar, the outside of the ladder, and the rungs, nitrogen bases, are nonpolar, there are other interactions called hydrostatic interactions that occur between the hydrogen and oxygen atoms of DNA and water. The internal part of the DNA tends to repel water, while the external sugar phosphate molecules tend to attract water. This creates a kind of molecular pressure that glues the helix together.
What are the oldest living cultured human cells?
The oldest, living, cultured human cells are the HeLa cell line. All HeLa cells are derived from Henrietta Lacks, 1920 to 1951, a 31-year-old woman from Baltimore, Maryland, who died of cervical cancer in 1951. Epithelial tissue obtained by biopsy became the first continuously cultured human malignant cells. From this culture, scientists were able to discover that 80 to 90% of cervical carcinomas contain human papillomavirus DNA. HeLa cells are used in many biomedical experiments.